The healer's hands were still warm from the examination when she delivered the verdict that would end Isla Thorne's life as she knew it. Not dormant, not delayed, not suppressed, biologically impossible. Her womb, the healer said with clinical detachment, was calcified, stone where life should grow. A medical anomaly so rare that only 3 cases existed in written history. All 3 women were dead within a year. Isla had 3 months, maybe 4, if she was unlucky. But Alpha Gregory Delaney didn't trade her away out of cruelty. He traded her away out of mercy to the only person in the shifter world who collected the dying, studied them, and sometimes, against all odds, saved them. The Lycan King. Chapter 1. The Trade. The dawn was the color of a wound, split open, ruddy, and raw along the eastern ridge where the Thornvale Mountains met the sky. Isla stood barefoot on the stone platform at the center of the courtyard, and the cold crept through her soles like a second heartbeat, slow and punishing. She did not cry. She had trained herself out of that 3 days ago, when healer Wanda Norman had delivered the diagnosis with the emotional investment of someone reading a grocery list. Calcified uterine syndrome, extremely rare, terminal. Around Isla now, 200 wolves of the Grey March pack gathered in formation, ranked by bloodline, arranged by status. Warriors flanked the north wall. Elders lined the southern colonnade. Pups clung to their mothers at the back, wide-eyed and silent. Everyone had been summoned. Everyone had come. Not because they cared about Isla Thorne, but because Alpha Gregory had commanded it, and his commands were not suggestions. They were gravity. He descended the stone steps from the main hall with the unhurried ease of a man carrying a burden he didn't know how to put down. Tall, broad-shouldered, jaw carved from something harder than regret, Gregory was the kind of alpha whose presence pressed against the air itself. His wolf radiated authority the way a furnace radiates heat, relentless, indiscriminate. But today, something was wrong with that authority. It flickered. It wavered. Isla felt it as a dull confusion behind her sternum. Everyone else dropped their gaze. She kept hers fixed on the horizon, on the bruised sky, on anything that was not him. In his right hand, he carried a length of braided rope. It shimmered faintly, ceremonial hemp, no silver thread, no cruelty woven into the fibers. Just tradition, just protocol. "The Lycan King," Gregory announced, his voice rolling outward like distant thunder, "accepts unusual cases, medical anomalies, conditions that defy conventional healing." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Isla felt it vibrate in the stones beneath her feet. Gregory turned to face her, his amber eyes bright with his wolf's presence, settled on her, not with disgust, not with indifference, but with something far more unbearable. Pity. "Isla Thorne suffers from a condition no healer in this territory can treat," he continued. "She has weeks, perhaps a month. I am sending her to the only person who might keep her alive." He knotted the rope around her wrist. The fibers pressed into her skin, not biting, not burning. Just there. A tether to a decision she hadn't made but couldn't refuse. "This is not exile," Gregory said, and his voice dropped low enough that only she could hear. "This is hope, the only kind I can give you." Isla's mother stood in the third row. Christina Williams, once vibrant, now diminished by years of watching her only daughter waste away in ways no wolf should. Her hands were clasped so tightly in front of her that the knuckles had gone white. She did not look up. She did not speak. No one spoke. Isla swallowed against the knot in her throat. She had carried a small object in her pocket for 3 years, a river stone, smooth and pale, taken from the creek where her father had taught her to skip rocks before the sickness claimed him. She pressed her thumb against it now, feeling its cool weight, and it was the only thing she owned that no one had tried to take. "The convoy leaves within the hour," Gregory continued, stepping back, already releasing her from his immediate orbit. "The Lycan King's citadel is a 7-day ride east." He paused, and for just a moment, his composure cracked. "May the Moon Mother guide what remains of your path." The blessing was hollow. Everyone knew it. Isla was lifted, not roughly, but not gently either, into the back of a covered wagon by two guards who would not meet her eyes. The wagon smelled of old hay and lamp oil. Through the canvas flap, she watched the courtyard shrink, the stone columns, the iron torches, her mother's bowed head growing smaller and smaller until the trees swallowed everything. She pressed the river stone against her chest and breathed. She did not know that the Lycan King had not asked for a dying wolf. She did not know that Gregory's desperate gamble was built on rumors, whispers, and one 10-year-old letter from a king who collected the broken and studied them like specimens in glass. She did not know that 7 days east, in a citadel of black stone and ancient power, a king sat in a laboratory surrounded by the preserved remains of the unsolvable, and wondered why his chest had ached since dawn. She knew only the cold, the rope, the silence of 200 people who had watched her leave, and felt nothing but relief that death was leaving their territory instead of staying. The wagon rattled forward, and Isla Thorne disappeared into the trees. 7 days of forest roads, creek crossings, and mountain passes reduced Isla to a creature of endurance. She slept in the wagon bed between sacks of grain, which was more dignity than she'd expected. The guards fed her twice a day: hard bread, dried venison, water from a leather flask that tasted of smoke. She did not complain. Complaint required the expectation of better treatment, and Isla had abandoned that expectation the moment Wanda Norman had said terminal without blinking. On the morning of the 7th day, the forest thinned, and the Lycan King's territory announced itself not with fanfare, but with presence. The trees grew taller here. The air changed, heavier, richer, saturated with the scent of cedar and rain-wet stone, and something older, something Isla could not name but felt in the marrow of her bones: power, ancient, vast, and utterly indifferent to the smallness of any single life. The citadel rose from the valley floor like a clenched fist. Black stone walls, 40 feet high, gleamed with moisture. Guard towers punctuated the perimeter at precise intervals, each one manned by sentinels whose eyes glowed faintly amber, their wolves pressed close to the surface. Watching. Always watching. Isla's wagon passed through the main gate, and the sound changed. The forest's soft rustling gave way to the sharp acoustics of stone and iron, boots on cobblestone, the clank of armor, voices low and clipped, speaking in the formal dialect of the Eastern Pax. The guards pulled her from the wagon with the same detached efficiency they had maintained throughout the journey. One of them, a young man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, glanced at the rope on her wrist and frowned. "No silver," he muttered to his companion. Gray March protocol," the other shrugged. "She's terminal, not rebellious." They led her through a series of corridors. Stone, torchlit, smelling of old wax and something medicinal. No tapestries here, no decoration, just clean lines, sterile precision, and the faint hum of something that sounded almost like machinery? Impossible. Shifters didn't use human technology. They brought her to a chamber that was not a throne room. It was a laboratory. Floor-to-ceiling glass cases lined the walls, each one holding specimens Isla couldn't identify. Preserved organs suspended in amber fluid. Crystallized bone structures that glowed faintly in the torchlight. A wolf's heart, still somehow beating, encased in a transparent prison. And in the center of it all, standing at a workbench covered in glass instruments, parchment, and then what looked like surgical tools, was a man who did not look like a king. He wore a leather apron stained with ink and something darker. His hair, dark, cropped short at the sides, was disheveled, as though he'd been running his hands through it for hours. No crown, no ceremonial robes, just a man in his early 30s, bent over his work with the intensity of someone who had forgotten the world existed beyond his research. When he turned to face her, Isla's breath caught. His eyes were not amber like most alphas. They were gray, deep, shifting gray that caught the torchlight and turned it silver. Sharp, focused, utterly, completely fixed on her with the kind of attention that felt like being dissected before he'd even touched her. King Luther Blackthorn did not sit on a throne. He stood in a laboratory, and when he spoke, and his voice was low, clinical, devoid of warmth or comfort, "Show me where it hurts." Chapter 2. The King's Laboratory. The guard who had driven the wagon stepped forward, chest puffed with the kind of confidence that came from never being told he was wrong. "Your Majesty, Alpha Gregory sends—" "I didn't ask you." Luther's eyes never left Isla. "I asked her." The guard's mouth snapped shut. Isla stood perfectly still, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen. The calcification had been spreading. She could feel it now, a hardness beneath her skin that shouldn't exist, like touching marble through flesh. "Here," she said quietly, pressing her palm flat against the fabric of her dress. "It started here. 3 months ago." Luther crossed the distance between them in 4 strides. Up close, she noticed things the torch-lit shadows had hidden, a faint scar along his left temple, an old wound long healed. Yet the calluses on his fingers, not the hands of a king who delegated, but hands that worked, hands that cut, sutured, examined. "May I?" He gestured toward her abdomen. Isla nodded, unable to find her voice. His hands were colder than Wanda's had been, methodical, precise. He pressed against her abdomen in 6 specific locations, watching her face for micro-expressions of pain. She winced at the 4th point, and he paused, pressed again with less pressure, then moved to the 5th. "Calcification," he murmured, more to himself than to her. "But not natural. The pattern is wrong." Isla's breath caught. "What do you mean, wrong?" Luther stepped back, walked to his workbench, and returned with a piece of parchment and charcoal. Without asking permission, he placed his palm against her abdomen again, and this time tracing an invisible pattern through the fabric. His expression shifted. The clinical focus gave way to something else. Recognition. And beneath it, fear. "Natural calcification spreads from a central point outward," he said, sketching on the parchment as he spoke. "Concentric circles. Predictable deterioration." He held up the sketch. A symbol Isla didn't recognize, geometric and deliberate, with lines that intersected at precise angles. "Yours forms this, a very old binding sigil." The laboratory suddenly felt smaller, colder. "What does that mean?" Isla asked. Luther's jaw tightened. "It means you weren't born infertile, Miss Thorne. Someone made you this way, and they did it before you were born." The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples moved outward, disturbing things Isla had kept carefully still for years. At the shame, the isolation, the way healers had looked at her with pity and pronouncement, as though her body's failure was a moral judgment from the Moon Mother herself. "That's not possible," Isla whispered. "I was examined at 13. The healer said my womb never formed properly. A birth defect." "Your healer was either incompetent or lying." Luther walked to one of the glass cases in the corner and removed a preserved specimen, a uterus, translucent and suspended in fluid, with the same geometric pattern etched in silver across its surface. Isla's stomach turned. "This," Luther said, his voice carefully neutral, "belonged to my mother." The laboratory tilted. Isla gripped the edge of the workbench to steady herself. "Your mother died in childbirth," she whispered. Everyone in the shifter world knew that story. And the Lycan Queen who had given her life to bring the current king into existence. "No," Luther's voice was granite. "My mother died 3 days after I was born, giving birth to my siblings." He turned to face her, and his expression was a knife. "She had triplets, and the birth killed her, just like this curse is designed to kill you." Isla couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The preserved womb in its glass prison seemed to pulse in her peripheral vision, a grotesque promise of what awaited her. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why would someone curse an unborn child?" Luther set the specimen back in its case with deliberate care, as though giving himself time to choose his words. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, almost gentle. Because curses like this aren't about you. They're about leverage, control. As someone wanted to ensure that if you ever became relevant to a certain bloodline, you'd serve as a weapon. What bloodline? He met her eyes. Mine. The room was silent, except for the faint hum Isla had noticed earlier. Now that she was paying attention, she realized it came from one of the glass cases, the one containing the still beating heart. I don't understand, Isla said. I've never met you before today. My family has no connection to the Lycan crown. We're nobody. Your family name is Thorn. Yes. The Thorn bloodline, Luther said, walking to a bookshelf and pulling down a leather-bound volume thick with age, was nearly extinct 30 years ago. Only 3 family lines remained, one in the Western Territories, one in the South, and one— He opened the book to a page marked with a red ribbon, in gray march. Your grandmother's line. He turned the book toward her. The page showed a family tree, hand-drawn in fading ink, with names and dates that meant nothing to Isla, but at the bottom, in newer ink, was a name she recognized. Christina Williams, born Thorn. Daughter, Isla. Your grandmother, Luther continued, was a curse breaker. Isla stared at him. A what? A rare bloodline ability. Women born with the capacity to absorb and neutralize blood magic. He gestured to the symbol he'd sketched. This binding sigil was designed specifically to suppress that ability, to turn a curse breaker into— He trailed off, but Isla finished the thought. Into a weapon. Yes. The implications crashed over her like a wave. If she was meant to be a weapon, that meant someone had planned this. Someone had known, before she was even born, that she would end up here, in this laboratory, with this king. Who did this to me? Isla's voice shook, not with fear, but with something hotter. Something that lived in the space between grief and rage. Luther closed the book. I don't know, but I intend to find out. And more importantly— He walked back to his workbench and began pulling out vials, parchment, instruments she couldn't name. I intend to reverse it. You can do that? He paused, and for the first time since she'd entered the laboratory, something other than clinical focus crossed his face. Uncertainty. I don't know, he admitted. I've been studying this curse pattern for 10 years, since my mother died, since my sisters— His jaw clenched. I've never had a living subject before. Well, every other woman with this curse was dead before I could examine her. How many others were there? 4. That I know of. 5 women. All cursed before birth. All dead. Isla pressed the river stone in her pocket so hard the smooth surface left an imprint in her palm. She was trembling, not with fear, but with the sheer enormity of what she was hearing. Her entire life, the shame, the isolation, the way her own pack had looked at her like she was broken, it had all been a lie. Not a divine judgment, not a birth defect. A curse. Deliberate, calculated, designed by someone who had decided before she could even draw breath that Isla Thorn did not deserve to be whole. Can it be reversed? She asked. Luther's gray eyes met hers, and in them she saw the same thing she felt burning in her own chest. Determination. The suppression can be lifted, he said carefully, but the process is dangerous. This curse has been active for 23 years. Your body has adapted to it. When I break the binding, there will be consequences. What kind of consequences? Pain, disorientation, potential organ failure if your system can't handle the shock of sudden regeneration. He paused. And if the curse was designed with a secondary trigger, something that activates when tampered with, it could kill you faster than the calcification would. So my options are die slowly from the curse, or die quickly trying to break it. Yes. Isla looked at the preserved specimens lining the walls, at the beating heart in its glass prison, at the sketch of the binding sigil that had stolen her life before it began. "I want you to try," she said. Her voice was steady now, as quiet and absolute. "I want you to break it." Luther studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Not pity, not sympathy, respect. "Then we start tonight," he said. "But first, I need to run a full analysis. Blood work, physical examination, magical resonance testing. I need to understand exactly how this curse is anchored before I attempt to remove it." He gestured toward a door at the back of the laboratory. "There's a recovery chamber through there. Clean clothes, water, food if you're hungry. Rest while you can." Isla nodded and turned toward the door, but before she reached it, Luther spoke again. "Miss Thorne." She looked back. "You should know," he said quietly, "that if this works, if I can break this curse and restore your curse-breaker ability, you'll become one of the most dangerous people in the shifter world. There are a lot of powerful wolves whose control depends on curses staying intact." "Good," Isla said, and she meant it. "Let them be afraid." She walked through the door, and it closed behind her with a soft click. Luther stood alone in his laboratory, staring at the sketch of the binding sigil, and allowed himself one moment of doubt. If he was wrong, if he failed, another woman would die. Another cursebreaker lost. But if he was right... He looked at the preserved womb in its case, at the pattern that had killed his mother. If he was right, he might finally have the key to ending a cycle of death that had haunted his bloodline for 3 generations. He picked up his tools and got to work. Chapter 3. The 3-Day Gamble. The recovery chamber was nothing like Isla expected. No stone walls, no torches. Instead, floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the eastern valley, where the first stars were beginning to appear against a darkening sky. The room was warm, heated by some mechanism Isla couldn't identify, and furnished simply. A bed with clean linens, a basin of water that steamed faintly, clothes folded on a chair, and on a small table beside the window, a tray of food that actually smelled appealing. Isla ate mechanically, her mind still circling Luther's words. Cursebreaker, weapon, designed before birth. She pressed her palm against her abdomen, feeling the hardness beneath her skin. Not a defect. A cage. She was still sitting by the window when the door opened 3 hours later. Luther entered without knocking, and carrying an armful of parchment and a leather satchel that clinked with glass vials. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from hours of intensive work, but his eyes were sharp. "I've analyzed your blood," he said without preamble, spreading the parchment across the table. "The curse is more complex than I thought." Isla stood, moving closer to see the diagrams he'd drawn. Chemical formulas, anatomical sketches, symbols she didn't recognize. "The binding sigil isn't just suppressing your curse-breaker ability," Luther continued, pointing to one of the sketches. "It's feeding on it, using your own power to fuel the calcification. The more your ability tries to manifest, as the faster the curse kills you. So breaking the curse will either free your ability or trigger a cascade failure that calcifies your entire body within hours." He looked at her directly. "There's no middle ground." Isla absorbed this. "What are the odds?" "I don't know. I've never attempted this before." "Guess." Luther was silent for a moment. Then, 40% survival, maybe less. 40%. Isla had been given 3 months to live. Now she was being offered a coin flip at survival, with the cost being potential immediate death. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something crack open inside her chest. Not her curse-breaker ability, something else. Something that had been sealed away even more thoroughly. Hope. "There's something else," Luther said, and his tone shifted. Became more hesitant, as though he was approaching territory he wasn't certain how to navigate. "I found a reference in the old texts, a theory about curse-breaking that I've never been able to test." What kind of theory? He walked to the window, looking out at the valley rather than at her. The curse is anchored to your bloodline, to your genetic code. Standard curse-breaking techniques won't work because the moment I remove the binding, your body will try to reassert the curse pattern. It's written into your DNA. So it's impossible. Not impossible, just unconventional. He turned back to face her. There's a window. According to the texts, if conception occurs during the curse-breaking process, the introduction of foreign genetic material can disrupt the curse's ability to reassert itself. The new DNA provides a shield, essentially. Something for your body to rebuild around that isn't cursed. Isla stared at him. You're saying I need to get pregnant while you're breaking the curse? Yes. That's insane. Yes. And if it doesn't work? Then you die, and possibly the child as well. Luther's expression was unreadable. But if it does work, the curse breaks permanently. Your curse breaker ability manifests, and the child, or children, since cursed breakers tend to carry multiples, would be born free of the binding. Children, plural. Isla's mind was reeling. This morning she'd been a dying woman being traded away like unwanted cargo. Now a king was standing in front of her, proposing that she attempt an experimental procedure that involved conception, curse-breaking, and a better-than-even chance of catastrophic failure. Why are you telling me this? She asked quietly. You could have just attempted the curse-breaking without mentioning this theory. Luther met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw genuine vulnerability in his expression. Because I won't use you as an experiment without your full consent. My mother died because my father tried to break her curse without telling her all the risks. He thought he was protecting her. Instead, he killed her and my sisters. His voice roughened. I will not make that mistake. You deserve to know everything, every option, every danger, and then you deserve to choose. Isla turned away, walking to the window. Outside, the stars were fully visible now, sharp and cold against the void. Choice. No one had ever given her that before. Not Gregory, who'd sent her here without asking. Not Wanda, all who'd delivered a death sentence without offering alternatives. Not even her mother, who'd spent years watching her suffer in silence. But this man, this king who kept corpses in glass and sketched curses like they were puzzles to solve, was offering her something no one else had: agency. If I agree to this, Isla said slowly, how would it work? Luther moved to stand beside her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. The curse-breaking process takes approximately 72 hours. I'd need to administer a series of alchemical compounds to destabilize the binding sigil. During that time, conception would need to occur, preferably within the first 24 hours. With you? Yes. His voice was clinical, professional. My bloodline is one of the oldest in the shifter world. Old enough that my genetic code predates most modern curses, including theoretically yours. Theoretically? I can't guarantee it will work, Miss Thorne. I can only tell you it's the best chance I can offer. Isla pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window. Her breath fogged the surface. She was 23 years old. She'd never been touched with anything other than clinical detachment or veiled disgust. She'd never imagined a future that included children, a mate, anything beyond slow deterioration and lonely death. And now this stranger was offering her not just survival, but the possibility of everything she'd been told she could never have. If she was willing to gamble on a 40% chance and surrender her body to science. What do you get out of this? She asked. Luther was quiet for a long moment. My bloodline is dying, he finally said. Every generation, fewer heirs, more stillbirths, more mothers lost. I've spent 10 years studying my mother's curse, trying to understand why the Blackthorn line seems specifically targeted. He gestured back toward the laboratory. You're the first living curse-breaker I've ever encountered. If this works, if we can break your curse and understand the mechanism, I might finally have the knowledge I need to save my own bloodline. So I'm still an experiment. Just a consensual one. Yes. He didn't flinch from the accusation. I won't pretend this is altruistic. I need the data. I need to understand how curse breaking works on a genetic level. But his voice softened. I also meant what I said. You deserve to live. Not as a specimen. As a person. Isla turned to face him fully. In the starlight filtering through the window, his gray eyes looked almost silver. If I say yes, she said, I need something from you. Name it. Honesty. Complete honesty. No matter how bad the news is, no matter what you discover, I want to know. I've spent my entire life being lied to about my own body. I won't accept that anymore. Agreed. And if this works, if I survive and gain this cursebreaker ability, I want access to your research, all of it. I want to know who did this to me and why. Luther's expression shifted. Something that might have been approval flickered across his features. You want revenge. I want answers. And if the answers lead to revenge, then yes. He extended his hand. Then we have an agreement. Full transparency, full access to research. And if we both survive this, will we find whoever designed this curse and make them answer for it? Isla looked at his offered hand. Calloused. Steady. The hand of someone who'd spent years cutting into the dead to understand the living. She took it. His skin was warm despite the coldness of his touch earlier. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her. Not attraction exactly, but recognition. As though some part of her that had been dormant her entire life suddenly stirred at his proximity. When do we start? She asked. Tonight. Now, if you're ready. He released her hand, and she felt the absence of his touch like a chill. I'll need to begin the alchemical preparations immediately. The compounds take several hours to reach effective potency. I'm ready? Luther nodded once, sharp and decisive. He moved toward the door, then paused. Miss Thorne? Isla. Oh, if we're doing this, you should use my name. Isla. He tested the word like he was tasting it. You should know that even if this works, the next 72 hours will be the most difficult of your life. The curse won't break quietly. It will fight, and fighting back will hurt. Everything about my life has hurt, Isla said simply. At least this time, I'm choosing the pain. Something shifted in Luther's expression. Recognition, perhaps, of someone who understood that sometimes survival required embracing agony. Then, let's begin. The laboratory was different at night. The specimens in their glass prisons seemed to glow with internal luminescence. The beating heart pulsed in rhythm with something Isla felt in her bones. And Luther moved through the space with the confidence of someone who knew every shadow, every surface, every secret the room held. He'd set up a medical examination table in the center of the room, surrounded by instruments Isla couldn't name, and vials of liquid in colors that shouldn't exist. Lie down, he instructed, his tone pure physician now. I need to establish baseline readings before I administer the first compound. Isla complied, the cold metal of the table pressing through the thin fabric of her borrowed clothes. Luther's hands moved over her with clinical precision, checking her pulse, examining her eyes, pressing against the calcification with practiced efficiency. He drew blood from her arm, 3 vials that he labeled and set aside. The first compound will destabilize the outermost layer of the binding sigil, he explained as he worked. You'll feel it as heat, possibly nausea. The calcification will resist, and your body will interpret the resistance as pain. I understand. He prepared a syringe, filling it with liquid that shimmered gold in the lamplight. This is going to hurt, he warned. I know. Luther injected the compound directly into her abdomen, at the center point of the calcification. Isla had thought she understood pain. She was wrong. The liquid fire spread through her core like a living thing, seeking out every point where the curse had taken root and burning it. She arched off the table, a scream building in her throat that she barely managed to swallow. Luther's hand pressed against her shoulder, holding her steady. "Breathe. It will pass." It didn't pass. It built, wave after wave of heat and agony that made her earlier suffering feel like a distant memory. And through it all, Luther stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, his voice steady and low, counting down the seconds until the first wave crested and finally, mercifully, began to recede. When Isla could breathe again, she was shaking, drenched in sweat. "That was the first compound," Luther said quietly. "There are 6 more. Each one will be worse than the last." Isla pressed the riverstone in her pocket. She'd refused to remove it, and felt its familiar smoothness anchor her. "Then we'd better keep going," she said through gritted teeth. "We're on a clock." Luther's eyes met hers, and in them she saw something she hadn't expected. Admiration. "Yes," he said. "We are." He picked up the second syringe, and Isla braced herself for the next wave of fire. Outside, the blood moon was still 6 months away, but neither of them knew that yet. Chapter 4. The Bloodline Secret. By the time Luther administered the 6th compound, Isla had stopped screaming. Not because the pain had lessened, it hadn't, but because she'd passed into some state beyond sound, where her entire existence had narrowed to the single point of agony in her core, and the rhythm of Luther's voice counting down the seconds. "Almost through," he said, his hand still steady on her shoulder. "The final compound stabilizes the destabilization. Paradoxical, I know, but necessary." Isla managed a weak nod. Her vision was blurring at the edges, and she could feel something fundamental shifting inside her body. The calcification was responding to the assault, but not in the way she'd expected. Instead of breaking down, it felt like it was rearranging, gathering itself for a counterattack. The 7th injection was cold instead of hot. The liquid spread through her like winter water through veins, and everywhere it touched, the fire from the previous compounds crystallized into something sharp and brittle. "Now we wait," Luther said, stepping back and wiping his hands on a cloth. His apron was stained with her blood. He'd had to make several incisions to inject the compounds directly into the calcified tissue. "Your body will spend the next 8 hours trying to decide whether to accept the change or reject it catastrophically." "Encouraging," Isla managed through chattering teeth. "I don't believe in false comfort." But his expression softened fractionally. "You've done well, better than most would have." He helped her sit up slowly. The movement sent fresh waves of pain through her abdomen, but it was manageable now. Distant. As though her nerve endings had simply given up trying to process the information. "There's a recovery room adjacent to the laboratory," Luther said. "You should rest while you can. I need to monitor your vitals every hour, but between checks, sleep if possible." Isla slid off the examination table, her legs unsteady. Luther caught her elbow before she could fall, and the contact sent that same strange jolt through her, stronger now, as though whatever barriers had existed between them were thinning. Their eyes met. "I need to tell you something," Luther said quietly, "before we proceed further." Something in his tone made Isla's chest tighten. "What?" He released her arm and walked to one of the bookshelves, pulling down the same leather-bound volume he'd shown her earlier. But this time, he opened it to a different page. "I told you that your grandmother was a curse breaker," he said. "That was true. What I didn't tell you was why that matters specifically to my bloodline." He turned the book toward her. The page showed 2 family trees side by side. One was labeled Thorn, the other Blackthorn, and near the top of both trees, a single line connected them. Isla's breath caught. "We're related?" "Distantly. 4 generations back." Luther's finger traced the connection. "Your great-great-grandmother, Miranda Coffey, born Thorn, was briefly bonded to my great-great-uncle, Alejandro Blackthorn." "Bonded? You mean married?" "No. True bonded. Soul deep." Luther's voice was carefully neutral. It lasted less than a year. Alejandro died under suspicious circumstances, and Miranda disappeared. The family assumed she'd died of grief. But according to records I found in the archive, she survived, had a daughter, started a new line far from Blackthorn territory. Your line, Isla said slowly. Yes. Isla stared at the family trees, her mind racing. You said Alejandro died under suspicious circumstances. He was poisoned, a slow-acting toxin that mimicked natural illness. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late. Luther closed the book. The official investigation found nothing, but my father believed, and I've confirmed through my own research, that Alejandro was murdered specifically because of his bond with Miranda. Because she was a curse-breaker. Yes, someone wanted to ensure that the Thorn and Blackthorn bloodlines never merged again. That a curse-breaker never gained access to Blackthorn resources and knowledge. The implications settled over Isla like a shroud. The curse on me. It's not random. Someone knew I might end up here. I believe so. Luther's gray eyes were dark with something that looked like old anger. I believe someone has been systematically eliminating the possibility of our bloodlines reconnecting for over a century. Your curse, my mother's curse, my sister's deaths, all part of the same pattern. Who would do that? Who benefits from keeping us apart? That, Luther said grimly, is what I've been trying to discover for 10 years. He walked to another section of the laboratory and retrieved a locked wooden box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, yellowed with age, written in various hands. These are correspondences between members of the Blackthorn family dating back 6 generations, he explained. I've been cataloging every mention of curse, illness, or unexplained death. The pattern is clear. Every time a Blackthorn attempts to bond with someone from a bloodline with curse-breaking potential, something happens. Poison, accident, sudden illness, and always within a year of the bonding. Isla felt cold despite the warmth of the laboratory. So whoever cursed me, whoever cursed your mother, they've been doing this for generations. Yes, and they're still active, still watching. Luther's jaw tightened. When Alpha Gregory sent word that he was sending you, I knew it was a test. Someone wanted to see if I'd figured out the pattern. If I'd make the connection. And if you did? Then they'd likely try to kill us both before we could break your curse and potentially identify them. The casual way he said it, as though assassination attempts were merely another variable to account for, should have terrified Isla. Instead, she felt that same hot thing building in her chest, the thing that lived between grief and rage. So we're not just breaking a curse, she said. We're exposing a conspiracy that's been running for over a century. Yes, and by doing this, by me potentially conceiving your child, we're doing exactly what this person has been trying to prevent. Yes, Isla laughed. It came out sharp and brittle, but genuine. Then I'm definitely doing it. I'd rather die ruining someone's century-long plan than die proving they were right. Luther's expression shifted. Something that might have been a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. I thought you might say that. He pulled one more letter from the box. This one was newer, the ink less faded. This arrived yesterday, before you did. Isla took the letter. It was short, 3 lines written in elegant script. The Thorn girl carries the old curse. Let her die, or die trying to save her. The Blackthorn line ends either way. There was no signature, just a symbol at the bottom, a circle intersected by 3 lines, forming a pattern that made Isla's eyes hurt to look at directly. Do you recognize this symbol? Luther asked. No, should I? It's the mark of the Twilight Court, at an ancient organization of blood mages who believe in maintaining what they call bloodline purity. They oppose any mixing of certain genetic lines, claiming it disrupts the natural order. And they've been trying to exterminate any connection between Thorns and Blackthorns for 100 years. So it would seem. Isla handed the letter back. How did they know I was coming? That, Luther said quietly, is the question that's been keeping me awake. Gregory sent word through official channels 3 weeks ago, but this letter arrived the day before his message did. The implications were clear. Someone in Grey March is working with them, Isla said. Someone who knew Gregory was sending me before he made it official. Luther nodded. I have my suspicions, but no proof yet. He walked to the window, looking out at the darkness beyond. There's something else you should know. The timing of your arrival, it's not coincidental. In 6 months there will be a blood moon. The texts say that curses like yours reach their full potency under the blood moon. That's when the calcification would complete, and I'd die. Yes, but it's also when a curse breaking would be most effective. If we can hold the curse in this destabilized state until the blood moon, and if conception occurs before then, the curse will break cleanly, permanently. Isla pressed her hand against her abdomen, feeling the strange brittleness of the calcification after the compounds. 6 months. That's how long I have to survive this. How long we have. Luther turned back to face her. I'm in this now, Isla. Whatever happens, whoever comes for us, we face it together. The words settled between them like a vow. From somewhere deep in the citadel, a bell tolled the hour. Midnight. You should rest, Luther said. In 8 hours, we'll know if your body has accepted the destabilization. If it has, we proceed to the next phase. Conception. Yes. Isla should have felt awkward, embarrassed, something. Instead, she felt only a strange calm. This was a choice, her choice, made with full knowledge of the risks, the conspiracy, the century of death that had led to this moment. Luther, she said as she moved toward the recovery room door. Thank you. For telling me everything. For not treating me like I'm too fragile to handle the truth. He inclined his head. You're not fragile, Isla. You're the strongest person I've met in a very long time. And if we survive this, then I think you're going to terrify a lot of very powerful people. Good, she said, echoing her earlier sentiment. Let them be afraid. She closed the door behind her, and Luther was alone in the laboratory once more. He looked at the letter with its hateful symbol, then at the specimen cases lining the walls, at his mother's preserved womb with its curse pattern matching Isla's. I know you're watching, he said quietly to the empty room. I know you're waiting to see if I fail like my father did, but you made one mistake. He picked up the syringe he'd used for the 7th compound, still containing a trace of the stabilizing solution. You assumed I'd try to save her the way he tried to save my mother. Alone. In secret. Afraid. His eyes hardened to flint. You didn't account for the possibility that she'd choose this. Yeah, that we'd choose this together. And choice, he smiled, cold and predatory, is the variable you never planned for. He disposed of the syringe and began preparing his equipment for the next phase. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Inside, 2 bloodlines that had been kept apart for a century began the dangerous work of reconnecting. And somewhere in the shadows, someone received word that the Thorn Girl had survived the first phase. The letter they sent in response was even shorter than the last. Accelerate the timeline. The blood moon comes early. Kill them both. Chapter 5. The 72 Hours. Isla woke to pain. Not the searing agony of the compounds, but something deeper. A bone-deep ache that felt like her body was being rebuilt from the inside out, every cell renegotiating its relationship with every other cell. She pressed her hand against her abdomen and felt it immediately. The calcification had changed. The marble-hard rigidity had softened to something more like dense clay. Still there. Still wrong, but yielding in a way it hadn't been before. Her body had accepted the destabilization. The door opened, and Luther entered carrying a tray. Not medical instruments this time, but food. Real food. Bread that smelled fresh, fruit, cheese, and tea that steamed in the cold morning air. You need to eat, he said, setting the tray on the small table beside her bed. The next phase will require significant energy. Your body is already under extreme stress. Isla sat up slowly, wincing at the movement. Did you sleep? Some. He pulled a chair closer and sat, which surprised her. His posture was less rigid than usual, as though the night's work had stripped away some layer of formality. I've been monitoring your vitals remotely. Your heart rate stabilized around dawn. The calcification is responding as predicted. Which means we proceed, if you still consent. Isla reached for the tea, letting the warmth seep into her hands. I do, but I have questions. Ask them. You said conception needs to occur within the first 24 hours. We're already... She glanced at the window where morning light was streaming through. 8 or 9 hours in, that doesn't leave much time. No, it doesn't. Luther's clinical mask slipped slightly, revealing something underneath that looked almost like discomfort. I want to be clear about what that means, practically speaking. It's not romantic. It's medical, necessary. But I won't pretend it won't be intimate, Isla finished. I understand. You're asking for access to my body in the most fundamental way possible, for the purpose of creating life that might save both of us. I'm not naive about what that entails. He nodded, some tension leaving his shoulders. I've prepared a separate chamber, more private, more comfortable than the laboratory. We can proceed whenever you're ready. Isla ate mechanically, her mind already moving past the awkwardness to the logistics. The necessity, the choice she'd already made. I'm ready now, she said, setting down her cup. Every hour we wait is an hour we lose. Luther stood, offering his hand. Then we begin. The chamber he led her to was in the eastern wing of the citadel, far from the clinical sterility of the laboratory. It was smaller, warmer, with windows that overlooked the valley, and a bed that looked like it was actually meant for sleeping rather than medical examination. I thought neutral territory would be better than my personal chambers or the laboratory, Luther explained, his voice carefully measured. Less complicated. Isla appreciated the consideration. This was already strange enough without the added weight of being in his private space. He closed the door, and the sound of it clicking shut seemed to amplify the silence between them. I've never done this before, Isla said suddenly. The words came out before she could stop them. Luther paused. I assumed as much, given your situation. Does that matter? For the curse breaking, I mean. Does it make it more dangerous? No. If anything, it might make it safer. Less potential for interference from previous genetic material. He moved to the window, giving her space, his back to her. But it does mean I need to be more careful. Physically. The process itself may be uncomfortable at first. Everything about this has been uncomfortable, Isla said, trying for levity and almost succeeding. At least, this discomfort has a purpose. She saw his shoulders tense, then deliberately relax. I'll try to make it as bearable as possible. Luther. She waited until he turned to face her. I know this is strange. I know we barely know each other, but I chose this, fully, knowingly. You don't have to handle me like I'm glass. Something shifted in his expression. You're not glass. But you are in pain, recovering from a procedure that should have killed you, and about to undergo something that most people approach with at least some degree of emotional preparation. I'm trying to... He stopped, searching for words. I'm trying not to be a monster about this. The vulnerability in his voice caught her off guard. Here was the king of the Lycan territories, a man who kept corpses in jars and spoke about death with clinical detachment, worried about being gentle with a woman he'd known for less than a day. You're not a monster, Isla said quietly. A monster wouldn't have told me the truth, wouldn't have given me the choice. She crossed the distance between them, moving until she stood close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. This close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair at the temples. He was beautiful in the way that sharp things are beautiful, compelling and dangerous in equal measure. "We're doing this together," she said. "So let's stop pretending it's purely clinical." His gray eyes searched hers. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if we're going to create life together, we should at least acknowledge that we're people, not just subjects in an experiment." Slowly, carefully, she reached up and placed her hand against his chest. His heart was beating fast beneath her palm, not calm, not detached, nervous. "You feel it too," she said, not a question. "Yes." The word was barely above a whisper. Since the moment you walked into the laboratory, like something recognizing something else. I don't know what it is." "The bloodline connection, from 4 generations back. Perhaps, or perhaps..." He covered her hand with his own, pressing it more firmly against his chest. "Perhaps it's something simpler. 2 people who've both been lonely for too long, finding each other in the middle of impossible circumstances." Isla's breath caught. She hadn't expected honesty like that, hadn't expected him to name the thing she'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. "I've been alone my whole life," she admitted. "By force, not choice. Being around you feels like remembering what it's like to be seen." "I see you." His other hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing against her cheekbone. "Oh, I see someone who should have been cherished and was discarded, someone who should have been protected and was cursed before birth. Someone..." His voice roughened. "Someone extraordinary that the world tried to convince was broken." Tears burned behind Isla's eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like this, like she was valuable, like she mattered beyond her usefulness. "Luther." He kissed her before she could finish. It wasn't aggressive, wasn't demanding, just a gentle pressure of lips against lips, testing, asking a question without words. Isla answered by leaning into him, her free hand coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself against the sudden vertigo of being wanted. The kiss deepened slowly, carefully, Luther's hands moving from her face to her waist, pulling her closer but not too close, always mindful of her injuries and her pain. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Isla felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. Not the curse, not the calcification, something else entirely. "That wasn't clinical," she said breathlessly. "No." He rested his forehead against hers. "It wasn't. I apologize if..." "Don't." She cut him off. "Don't apologize for making this feel like something other than a medical procedure. Don't apologize for making me feel like a woman instead of a specimen." His hands tightened on her waist. "Isla, I want this," she said clearly. "Not just the procedure, not just the curse breaking. This. You. Whatever this is between us. We barely know each other. I know you've spent 10 years trying to save a bloodline that was dying because you couldn't save your mother. I know you keep her womb in a jar, not out of morbidity, but out of determination. I know you gave me the truth when lies would have been easier. I know." She pressed closer. "I know you're just as lonely as I am, and I know that if we're going to survive the next 6 months, we're going to need more than just clinical detachment between us." Luther was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that felt like being dissected and cherished simultaneously. "I haven't let anyone close since my sisters died," he said finally. "I've been afraid that caring would make me weak, make me make mistakes." "What if caring makes you stronger?" He kissed her again, and this time there was less hesitation, less careful control. His hands moved over her with growing confidence, mapping the geography of her body, not as a physician, but as a man discovering something precious. When he lifted her and carried her to the bed, Isla felt the calcification pulse once, sharp and hot, as though the curse recognized what was happening and was gathering itself to fight. "It's reacting," she gasped against his mouth. "I know. We need to—" He broke off, his hands moving to the fastenings of her borrowed dress. "We need to complete this before the curse fully activates its defenses." They shed clothing with increasing urgency, the clinical necessity reasserting itself alongside the growing heat between them. Isla's hands shook as she helped him with his shirt, revealing a torso marked with scars, some old, some recent, all telling stories of a man who'd put himself in harm's way repeatedly. "You've been hurt," she said, tracing one particularly vicious scar across his ribs. "Research isn't always safe." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Are you ready?" Isla felt the calcification pulse again, harder this time, like something with claws trying to tear its way out. "Yes," she said, "before I lose my nerve." Luther positioned himself above her, his weight careful, controlled. "This will hurt at first. The curse will fight. But afterward—" His eyes met hers. "Afterward, if the theory is correct, your body will begin rebuilding itself around the new genetic material. The pain should lessen. And if the theory is wrong? Then we'll have 3 days together before we know for certain." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. 3 days is more than some people get." Isla reached up and pulled him down into a kiss, and as their bodies joined, she felt the curse activate fully. And pain exploded through her core, the calcification fighting, spreading, trying to complete its work before the foreign genetic material could interfere. Luther held her through it, his voice low and steady in her ear, counting down seconds, breathing with her, grounding her against the agony. And somewhere around the point where Isla thought she might actually die from the pain, something shifted. The calcification shuddered, cracked, and began, molecule by molecule, to break down. The curse was losing. Isla cried out, not in pain this time, but in relief so profound it felt like being reborn. Luther felt it too. She could see it in his eyes, wonder, hope, and something fiercer. Victory. "It's working," he breathed. "Isla, it's actually working." They stayed intertwined as the dawn light strengthened, as Isla's body slowly, painfully, as miraculously began to heal itself, and as 3 microscopic clusters of cells, each one carrying half her genetic code and half his, began their own improbable journey toward life. Neither of them knew yet that conception had been successful. Neither of them knew that the curse, in its death throes, would birth one final complication. Neither of them knew that somewhere in the Citadel, a healer who'd served the Blackthorn family for 30 years was preparing to send word to the Twilight Court. The destabilization succeeded, conception likely, recommend immediate intervention. For now, they only knew relief, and the tentative, fragile beginning of something that felt dangerously like hope. Chapter 6. The Mother's Truth. 3 days passed in a blur of pain, monitoring, and cautious optimism. Luther ran blood tests every 6 hours, documenting the gradual breakdown of the calcification with the meticulous attention of someone who'd spent a decade waiting for this exact result. Isla endured the examinations with growing patience, watching him work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. On the morning of the 4th day, he entered her recovery chamber with an expression she'd never seen on his face before: joy. 3 heartbeats, he said without preamble. Faint, impossibly fast, but there. 3. Isla's hand flew to her abdomen. The calcification was nearly gone now, just traces of hardness that Luther assured her would fade completely within another week. But beneath that fading curse, something new was growing. Hey, 3 lives. "Triplets," she whispered, "just like the text predicted, just like my mother." Luther sat on the edge of her bed, and the casual intimacy of the gesture spoke to how much had changed between them in 72 hours. The curse pattern, when broken this way, always results in multiples. The genetic disruption creates a kind of fertility surge. He took her hand, and she felt the now familiar jolt of recognition that passed between them whenever they touched. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Terrified, amazed, alive." She laughed shakily. "I was supposed to be dead in 3 months. Now I'm carrying 3 children who shouldn't be possible. They're possible because you refuse to accept impossible." Luther's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You're extraordinary, Isla. I hope you're beginning to understand that." Before she could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. Luther's expression shifted immediately from tender to alert. "Enter." A guard stepped through the doorway, one of the sentinels Isla recognized from her arrival. His face was grim. "Your Majesty, Alpha Gregory Delaney has arrived. He's requesting immediate audience. He says it's urgent, about Miss Thorne." Isla's stomach dropped. Gregory was here? After sending her away, why would he— "Show him to the formal receiving chamber," Luther said, standing. "And send for Beta Raymond. I want additional security present." The guard nodded and withdrew. Luther turned back to Isla. "Did you expect him to come?" "No. He made it very clear I was being sent away permanently." Her mind raced. Something must have happened. Something that made him travel 7 days to get here. "Can you walk? Are you strong enough?" Isla pushed herself up. The lingering pain from the curse breaking was manageable now, and the pregnancy, if it could even be called that yet, 3 microscopic clusters of cells, hadn't yet manifested any symptoms. "I'm strong enough, and I want to hear what he has to say." The formal receiving chamber was exactly what it sounded like, a room designed for political audiences, with high ceilings, formal seating, and an atmosphere that discouraged intimacy. Gregory stood in the center, looking travel-worn and older than Isla remembered. His eyes found her immediately, and something like relief crossed his face before he schooled it back to neutral. "Isla, you're alive. Did you expect otherwise?" "I hoped otherwise." He glanced at Luther, who had positioned himself slightly in front of Isla in a protective stance that didn't escape anyone's notice. "Your Majesty, I appreciate you seeing me without notice." "You traveled 7 days. I assume you have reason." Luther's tone was pure ice. "Speak it." Gregory's jaw tightened. "May I speak with Isla privately?" "No." Luther didn't budge. "Anything you have to say to her, you can say in front of me." For a moment, Isla thought Gregory might argue. Then he exhaled heavily and nodded. 3 days ago, we received word from an informant in the Eastern Territories. The Twilight Court has accelerated their timeline. They're planning to move against you, both of you, within the month. Isla felt ice slide down her spine. Luther had told her about the court, about the century of interference. But the idea of them actively moving against them now? "How did you get this information?" Luther demanded. Gregory reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded letter. "Because the informant is my sister, and because—" he looked at Isla directly. "Because your mother asked her to watch for exactly this situation before she died." The world tilted. "My mother?" Isla's voice came out strangled. "My mother died when I was 10. She was sick. What does she have to do with—" "Your mother wasn't sick." Gregory's voice was heavy with something that sounded like old guilt. "She was poisoned, slowly, over the course of 2 years, by someone in our pack who was working for the Twilight Court." Isla couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room was spinning, and the only thing keeping her upright was Luther's hand suddenly gripping her elbow. Explain," Luther said, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." Gregory unfolded the letter and held it up. Isla recognized the handwriting immediately. Her mother's elegant script, unchanged from the letters she'd written to Isla as a child. "Christina came to me 18 years ago," Gregory began. "Before you were born, Isla. She told me she'd discovered she was pregnant, and that the pregnancy was the result of—" he hesitated— "of an assault, by a man she wouldn't name. She was terrified. Not of the pregnancy itself, but of what she'd learned about her attacker. He gestured to a chair. May I? This is difficult to explain. Luther nodded tersely, and Gregory sat. Isla sank into the chair beside him, her legs no longer trustworthy. Christina told me she'd researched her attacker's background and discovered he was connected to an organization called the Twilight Court, that he'd specifically targeted her because of her bloodline, the Thorn bloodline. She knew she was a cursebreaker? Isla asked. She suspected. Her own mother had died under mysterious circumstances when Christina was young, but before she died, she'd told Christina stories about women in their family who could break curses, who were hunted for it. Gregory's expression was pained. Christina was afraid that if the court knew she was pregnant, they'd kill the child. Kill her. So she asked me to protect her. You bonded with her, Luther said. Not a question. No. She refused to bond. Said it would make both of us targets. But I claimed her as Pack, gave her my name in the records, hidden when you were born. He looked at Isla. I claimed you as Pack blood. Protected. Isla's mind was reeling. Then why did you send me away? If you promised my mother you'd protect me, because she made me promise something else. Gregory's voice broke. She made me swear that if you ever started showing signs of the curse, if the calcification began, I would send you to the Blackthorn King. Not because he could heal you, because he was the only person powerful enough to protect you while you broke the curse yourself. Silence fell like a hammer. She knew, Isla whispered. She knew this would happen, that I'd be cursed, that I'd need Luther. She knew more than that. Gregory handed her the letter. She wrote this 2 years before she died, before the poison took full hold. She asked my sister to keep it safe and deliver it only if you survived long enough to reach the Blackthorn Citadel. Isla's hands shook as she unfolded the letter, her mother's handwriting blurred through sudden tears. My dearest Isla, if you're reading this, it means you survived. It means the curse didn't kill you before you could reach the one person who might help you break it. I'm so proud of you, so impossibly proud. I need you to know the truth. All of it. Your father's name was Alejandro Klein. He was a blood mage working for the Twilight Court, and he assaulted me specifically because you are, descended from a line of cursebreakers. The court wanted to create a weapon, a cursebreaker whose ability was locked away, who would die if she ever tried to manifest it. They cursed you in my womb, before you even drew breath. They made you a trap. But they made a mistake. They assumed I wouldn't understand what they'd done. They assumed I'd never figure out the pattern. I spent 10 years researching, learning, and I discovered something they didn't account for. The curse can only be broken by someone whose bloodline predates it, someone from the old families, someone like the Blackthorn King. More than that, it can only be broken through willing conception, through choice, through the one thing the court has spent centuries trying to eliminate, love between bloodlines they want kept separate. If you're reading this, you've chosen him, or he's chosen you, or you've chosen each other. And that choice, that's the variable they never planned for. The triplets you're carrying, yes, triplets, the pattern always produces 3, are the court's worst nightmare. 3 children with cursebreaker ability and Blackthorn power. 3 children who cannot be controlled or suppressed or turned into weapons. They will come for you, for Luther, for the babies. But you have something I never had, my darling girl. You have the truth, you have knowledge, and you have the strength I saw in you even as a child. The strength to refuse impossible, to break unbreakable, to choose your own path. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you this myself. I'm sorry I had to die to keep you safe. The poison was slow, but it was certain. I could have fought it, but fighting would have drawn attention, would have made the court realize I'd figured out their plan. So I chose to die quietly, to make them think they'd won. They were wrong. You're my victory, Isla. You and those 3 impossible lives inside you. Fight for them. Oh, fight for yourself. Fight for the future the court wants to deny you, and know that I loved you. Every moment, every breath, forever your mother, Christina. Isla read the letter 3 times before she could speak. When she finally looked up, tears were streaming down her face. She knew everything, she said hoarsely. She knew what they'd done. She knew what would happen. And she died to protect me from them, realizing she'd figured it out. Gregory nodded. The poison was administered by one of our pack healers, someone Christina trusted. We didn't discover who until after she died, and by then, the healer had disappeared. Who? Luther's voice was sharp. Her name was Wanda Norman. Isla's blood went cold. Wanda examined me. When I was 13, she declared me infertile. Horror dawned. She's been monitoring the curse and making sure it was progressing correctly. And she's the one who told me you were dying, Gregory said grimly. She's the one who suggested I send you to Luther. She wanted this to happen. Wanted you here, where the court could more easily— He stopped, looked at Luther. Where is Wanda now? Luther's expression was murderous. She's been serving as a consulting healer in my citadel for 3 years. She has access to— He was moving before he finished the sentence, striding toward the door. Raymond, lock down the citadel. Find healer Wanda. Alive. I want her alive. Chaos erupted in the hallway beyond, shouting, running footsteps. Isla stood on shaking legs, her mother's letter clutched in her hands. Gregory stood beside her. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you before. I'm sorry I sent you away like that. But your mother made me swear, made me promise that I'd follow her plan exactly, even if it looked cruel. You were protecting me, the only way you knew how. Isla looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the weight he'd been carrying, the guilt of appearing to abandon her, the fear that her mother's plan wouldn't work. Thank you, she said, for keeping your promise to her. He nodded, something easing in his expression. A guard burst into the chamber, out of breath. Your Majesty, healer Wanda is gone. Her chambers are empty, but we found this. He held up a vial. Dark liquid, the same color as the compounds Luther had used to destabilize Isla's curse. She's been stealing my research, Luther said, his voice flat with rage. Sending it to the court. They know exactly how I broke the curse. Well, they know about the triplets. He turned to Isla. They're coming, soon. Isla felt the flutter of life in her abdomen. Too early to be real, she knew, but her mind supplied it anyway. 3 heartbeats. 3 impossible lives. Let them come, she said, her mother's words echoing in her mind. We know the truth now. We know what they want. And we know— She placed her hand over her stomach. We know what we're fighting for. Gregory stepped forward. You'll need allies. The Grey March Pack stands with you. All of us. Luther's eyes met Isla's across the chamber. In them, she saw determination, fury, and something else that made her breath catch. Love. Then we prepare, he said. We have 6 months until the blood moon, 6 months to fortify, to plan, to ensure that when the Twilight Court comes, we're ready, Isla finished. Outside, and storm clouds gathered over the citadel. Inside, 3 impossible lives continued their quiet, defiant growth, and somewhere in the shadows, Wanda Norman sent one final message to her masters. The Thorn Girl survived, conception successful, triplets confirmed. She knows the truth. Recommend immediate termination. All 4 targets. Chapter 7. The Siege of Secrets. The war room was a circular chamber in the Citadel's west tower, with maps pinned to every surface and a table scarred by generations of strategic planning. Luther stood at the head, arms crossed, his expression holding the particular stillness that Isla had learned meant he was at his most dangerous. Around the table sat Gregory, Beta Raymond Bryant, a grizzled warrior who'd served the Blackthorn crown for 30 years, and a woman Isla hadn't met before. She was older, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. "This is Gail Blackwell," Luther introduced, "head of my intelligence network. If anyone knows where Wanda went, it's her." Gail inclined her head toward Isla. "Congratulations on surviving the impossible, Miss Thorne. Your mother would be proud." "You knew my mother?" "I knew of her. Christina's research into the Twilight Court was thorough. She contacted me twice, asking questions about Blackthorn family history. I didn't understand why at the time." Gail's expression softened. "I'm sorry we couldn't protect her." "She protected herself, and me." Isla placed her hands flat on the table, feeling the cool wood ground her. "Now we need to protect the children." "Agreed." Gail spread a map across the table. Not of territories, but of something else. A web of connections, names linked by lines in different colors. The Twilight Court isn't a formal organization. It's a network of blood mages, corrupt healers, and old family wolves who believe in bloodline purity. They operate through proxies and sympathizers. Her finger traced several red lines. Wanda Norman is one of their primary agents, and she's been placed in various packs over the past 30 years, always as a healer, always in positions where she can monitor specific bloodlines. "Like mine," Isla said. "And mine," Luther added grimly. "She examined my mother during her pregnancy, declared everything normal. 3 days after the triplets were born, my mother was dead." The room went cold. "You think Wanda killed her?" Raymond asked. "I think Wanda administered something that accelerated the curse's final phase, made sure my mother died exactly when the court wanted her to." Luther's hands clenched, "And now she's had access to Isla, to our research, to everything we've done to break the curse." "Which means the court knows our weaknesses," Gregory said, "knows exactly how to attack." Gail nodded. "I've tracked Wanda's movements since she fled. She went east, and toward the border territories where court influence is strongest. She's likely reporting to her superior now." "Who is?" Isla asked. "That's what we've been trying to determine for 10 years. Gail tapped a name at the center of the web, a blank space marked only with a question mark. "The court's leadership is deliberately obscure. We know there's a head council, 3 members, always 3, but their identities are protected by blood oaths and concealment spells." 3 members, Isla repeated, something clicking in her mind. "The curse produces 3 children. My mother was poisoned to keep 3 secrets. Is the number significant?" Luther's eyes sharpened. "In blood magic, 3 is the number of binding. Past, present, future, mind, body, spirit. The court uses triadic structures in all their workings. So if we want to expose them, well, we need to break 3 bindings," Raymond said. "Find 3 secrets." "Or kill 3 leaders," Gregory added darkly. "We don't even know who they are," Isla pointed out. "How do we fight people we can't identify?" "We force them to reveal themselves." Luther walked to a different map, this one showing the Citadel and surrounding territories. "They want to kill us before the blood moon, before the triplets are born and their worst fear is realized. That gives them 6 months to act." "So we make them act on our terms," Isla said slowly, understanding. "We set a trap." "Exactly." Luther's smile was cold. "Gail, how many people know about Isla's pregnancy?" "Currently? Perhaps a dozen. Your inner circle, Gregory's people, a few guards who were present during medical examinations." "We keep it that way. Officially, Isla is still dying. The curse-breaking failed. She has perhaps a month before the calcification completes." Luther looked at Isla. "Can you play that role? Appear weak, dying?" Isla thought of her mother, who'd spent 2 years pretending the poison wasn't killing her, who'd died quietly to protect her daughter. "I can do it," she said. "But why? What does that accomplish?" "It makes the court complacent. They think they're winning. That time is on their side." Luther's expression was fierce. "And while they're waiting for you to die naturally, we hunt them." "How?" Gregory asked. "Wanda didn't work alone. She had support here, In my citadel. Someone helped her steal my research. Someone fed her information about our movements. Luther's gaze swept the room. We find that person. We make them talk. Oh, and we follow the thread back to the court's leadership. That could take months, Raymond objected. We have 6 months, Luther countered, and highly motivated targets. The court will be watching Isla, waiting for her to die. When she doesn't, when the deadline passes and she's still alive, they'll panic, send more agents, make mistakes. You want to use me as bait, Isla said. I want to use us both as bait. They want to prevent the triplets from being born. So we give them opportunities, controlled opportunities where they think they have the advantage. Gale was nodding slowly. It could work, but you'd need absolute security. One mistake and… I know. Luther looked at Isla. It's dangerous. More dangerous than anything we've already done. If you're not willing… I'm willing. Isla stood, and her hand moving instinctively to her abdomen. They cursed me before I was born. They killed my mother. They've spent a century trying to eliminate the connection between our bloodlines. I'm not going to hide and hope they forget about us. She met Luther's eyes. We fight. We expose them. And we make sure our children are born into a world where the Twilight Court can't touch them. Gregory smiled, the first genuine smile Isla had seen from him. You sound like your mother. Good. Isla's voice was steel wrapped in velvet. She taught me that sometimes the only way to survive is to attack. The plan took shape over the next 3 hours. Publicly, Isla would remain in the Citadel, growing progressively weaker. Luther would summon specialists from across the territories, ostensibly seeking last hope treatments for her condition. Each specialist would be vetted by Gale's network, but the court wouldn't know that. They'd see it as desperation, weakness. Meanwhile, Raymond would quietly investigate the Citadel staff, looking for whoever had helped Wanda access Luther's research. Gregory would return to Grey March and spread word through his pack that Isla was dying, ensuring the information reached court sympathizers. And Isla herself would work with Luther to document everything they'd learned about curse-breaking. Not to hide it, but to use it as bait. They'd create false research notes, leaving them where a spy might find them. Notes that suggested the curse could still be reactivated, that Isla's recovery was temporary. We make them think they still have a chance, Luther explained, that killing us is still necessary. And when they come? Isla asked. Oh, we're ready. He gestured to Raymond. How many warriors can we trust absolutely? 50. All bonded to the Blackthorn line through blood oaths, incorruptible. Position them throughout the Citadel, concealed but ready. When the court makes their move, and they will make their move, we take prisoners, we extract information, and we destroy them piece by piece. The meeting dispersed near midnight. Gregory clasped Isla's hand before he left. Your mother would be proud, he said again, not just of your survival, but of your courage. Thank you. For keeping your promise to her, for protecting me even when I didn't know I needed protection. I failed you once by sending you away. I won't fail you again. His expression hardened. The Grey March pack stands ready. If the court moves against you, we'll be there. After he'd gone, and Isla found herself alone with Luther in the war room, the maps and plans surrounded them like a fortress of paper and ink. 6 months, she said quietly. 6 months of pretending to die while actually growing 3 lives. 6 months of waiting for assassins who could strike at any moment. Are you afraid? Luther asked. Terrified. But she looked at him, at this man who'd given her truth and choice, and something that felt dangerously like love. I'm also angry, and anger is useful. He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. I need you to understand something. If this goes wrong, if the court manages to, if I have to choose between you and the children, don't. Isla pressed her fingers against his lips. Don't ask me to tell you which to choose. What we survive together or not at all. That's not strategic. I don't care. She pulled his hand to her abdomen, where 3 impossible lives were growing despite every law of magic and nature that said they shouldn't exist. We're already breaking every rule, Luther. Let's break one more. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and she tasted fear and determination in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Luther rested his forehead against hers. 6 months, he murmured. We can survive 6 months. We can survive anything, Isla corrected. Together. 3 territories away, in a chamber lit only by blood-red candles, 3 figures sat in a circle. The Thorn Girl survived, one said. Their voice was androgynous, disguised by magic. Worse, she's pregnant. Triplets. The second figure's hands clenched. Wanda confirmed it before she fled. Then we accelerate the timeline, the third said. We cannot allow those children to be born. 3 curse breakers with Blackthorn power? It would undo everything we've built. The blood moon is 6 months away. We don't wait for the blood moon. We act now, before the pregnancy advances, before they fortify further. How? The Blackthorn Citadel is nearly impregnable. A pause. Then, we don't attack from outside. We attack from within. The first figure smiled. Wanda wasn't our only asset in the Citadel. She was just the most visible. You have another agent? I have 3, and one of them is close enough to Luther Blackthorn to strike when he's most vulnerable. The candles flickered as magic sealed their decision. 1 month, the first figure said. We give them 1 month to grow complacent. Then we strike, kill the mother, the children die with her, and the Blackthorn line ends as it should have 3 generations ago. The other 2 nodded in agreement. Outside their chamber, a raven perched on the windowsill. Its eyes glowed faintly amber, not a natural bird, but a construct, a spy. Gail Blackwell, watching through the raven's eyes from her chamber in the Blackthorn Citadel, allowed herself a small smile. Got you, she whispered. She couldn't see the figures' faces, couldn't hear their names, but she had their timeline, their strategy, their weakness. They thought they had 3 agents in the Citadel. Now she just had to find them before they struck. 1 month. The clock was ticking. Chapter 8. The Blood Moon Prophecy. Isla's pregnancy announced itself violently at 6 weeks. She woke in the middle of the night, her body convulsing with pain that had nothing to do with the curse. Luther was beside her in seconds, his hands glowing with healing energy, but this wasn't something he could heal. This was life asserting itself with brutal force. The triplets, he said, his enhanced senses zeroing in on her abdomen. They're growing faster than they should, much faster. Between waves of pain, Isla gasped, How much faster? You should be 6 weeks along, based on their development. His expression was equal parts wonder and concern. They're measuring closer to 12 weeks, maybe more. Is that the curse? Some kind of residual effect? I don't know. Luther helped her sit up, as supporting her weight against his chest. I need to examine you properly, map their growth, understand what's happening. The examination took 2 hours. By the time Luther finished, dawn was breaking through the windows, and Isla could see the fear beneath his clinical facade. Tell me, she said. All of it. Luther set down his instruments and sat beside her on the bed. The triplets are developing at approximately double the normal rate. If this continues, you won't carry them for 9 months. You'll carry them for 4.5, maybe 5. Isla's mind raced. The blood moon is 6 months away. If they're born before then, the curse's final binding won't be broken. The children will be born still partially connected to the curse structure. It won't kill them immediately, but... Luther's voice was tight. Cool. But they'll be vulnerable. The court could potentially re-establish the binding, turn them into what they wanted you to be. Weapons. So we need to delay the birth until the blood moon. Or accelerate the blood moon. Isla stared at him. You can do that? No, but I know someone who might be able to. Luther stood, pacing to the window. There's an archive keeper in the Northern Territories, Emily Cook. She's over 200 years old and was alive during the last forced celestial event. Forced celestial event? Blood mages interfering with natural astronomical cycles for ritual purposes. It's forbidden now. The backlash nearly destroyed 3 packs, but Emily documented the process. He turned back to face her. If anyone knows how to accelerate a blood moon, it's her. That's insane! Yea, and dangerous. So is allowing our children to be born vulnerable to the court. Luther's gray eyes were fierce. I won't risk them, Isla. I won't let them become what you almost became. Isla felt the flutter of life in her abdomen, real now, not imagined. 3 heartbeats, rapid and strong, demanding existence. Then we contact Emily, she said. We find out if it's possible. Emily Cook arrived 3 days later, traveling in a carriage that looked older than most of the Citadel. She emerged like a living relic, impossibly thin, impossibly upright, with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. Luther Blackthorne, she said without preamble. I heard you were attempting the impossible. I see you've succeeded. Her gaze shifted to Isla with uncomfortable intensity. Thorn bloodline, cursebreaker, and pregnant with triplets who are growing at an unnatural rate. She smiled, sharp and knowing. You don't do anything halfway, do you, child? I don't have the luxury of halfway, Isla replied. Emily laughed, a sound like wind through dead trees. I like her. Come, show me your research. Show me everything. They spent hours in the laboratory while Emily examined Luther's notes, Isla's medical charts, and samples of the compounds that had broken the curse. She asked questions that cut to the heart of things, challenged assumptions, and occasionally made observations that left even Luther speechless. Finally, as the sun began to set, Emily straightened from the table. The accelerated growth is a direct result of the curse-breaking method you used, she announced. When you disrupted the binding through conception, you didn't just free Isla's curse-breaker ability, you turbocharged it. Her body is pouring regenerative energy into those fetuses at a rate that would kill a normal woman. I'm not dying, Isla said. No, because you're not normal. You're a curse-breaker carrying the children of one of the oldest bloodlines in existence. Your body is adapting, evolving, becoming something new. Emily's expression was almost envious. You're witnessing the birth of a new subspecies and you don't even realize it. Can we slow the pregnancy? Luther asked. Why would you want to? The accelerated rate is the only thing keeping the court from acting immediately. They're waiting for the blood moon because they believe you are. If they knew the children would be born in 3 months instead of 6, they'd attack tomorrow. But if they're born before the blood moon, the curse's final binding remains partially active. Yes, I understand the problem. Emily walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. There are 2 solutions. Neither is ideal. Tell us. First option. You attempt to magically slow the pregnancy. Risky. You could trigger a miscarriage or cause developmental problems. The triplets' accelerated growth is tied to Isla's curse-breaker energy. Suppress that energy, and you might suppress the children's viability. Not acceptable, Isla said immediately. I agree. Which leaves option 2. Emily turned back to face them. You accelerate the blood moon. Force it to occur when you need it to, rather than when the celestial calendar dictates. You said that nearly destroyed 3 packs last time. It did, because the mages who attempted it were arrogant fools who thought they could bend the cosmos to their will without consequence. Emily's smile was grim. But I documented their mistakes, and I know how to avoid them. Luther moved closer. What would it require? A massive expenditure of magical energy focused through a celestial anchor point. In practical terms, a ritual performed at a place where the veil between worlds is thin, powered by the combined life force of at least 50 bonded pairs, and anchored by someone with enough raw power to serve as a conduit. She looked at Luther. Someone like a Lycan King, whose bloodline predates most modern magic. You want me to be the conduit. I want you to be the anchor. Isla will be the conduit. The room went silent. Absolutely not, Luther said. She's pregnant. Channeling that much energy could kill her and the children. Not channeling it will definitely doom the children to becoming court weapons, Emily countered. And before you argue further, consider this. Isla is a curse breaker. Her entire biological purpose is to absorb and redirect magical energy. She's literally the only person alive who could survive serving as a conduit for a celestial acceleration. Isla felt the weight of the decision settling over her like a shroud. If I do this, if I serve as the conduit, what are the risks? Death, madness, permanent magical scarring, miscarriage. Take your pick. Emily's bluntness was almost refreshing. But if you don't do it, your children will be born vulnerable, and the court will have centuries to figure out how to bind them. Oh, those are your options. When would we need to perform this ritual? Luther asked, his voice strained. Based on the triplets' current growth rate, you have approximately 2.5 months before they're born. The ritual requires a full moon to anchor to. The next full moon is in 6 weeks. Emily's expression was grave. Which means you have 6 weeks to find 50 bonded pairs willing to risk their lives, fortify the ritual site against court interference, and prepare Isla to channel enough power to literally pull a blood moon out of the sky 2 months early. That's impossible, Luther said flatly. So was breaking a century-old curse through conception. So was surviving the curse-breaking process while pregnant. So was everything you've already accomplished. Emily gathered her things. I'll remain here to help prepare. But you need to decide quickly. Every day you wait is a day the court gets closer to realizing your children are coming sooner than they think. She paused at the door. And Luther? When this is over, assuming we all survive, I want full access to your research. What you've discovered about curse breaking could change everything. After she left, Luther and Isla sat in silence. Finally, Isla spoke. We don't have a choice, do we? We always have a choice. Then I choose to fight. I choose to do whatever it takes to make sure our children are born free. She took his hand, even if it means pulling down the moon. Luther pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with desperate tenderness. I can't lose you. Not now, not after everything. You won't. I'm stronger than you think. I know how strong you are. That's what terrifies me. He pressed his forehead against hers. Strong people take impossible risks. Good thing I have you to keep me grounded. They stayed like that until full dark, holding each other against the weight of what was coming. The next morning, Gale burst into Luther's study without knocking. I found one of them, she said breathlessly. One of the court's agents in the Citadel. Luther was on his feet instantly. Who? Jonathan Blake, one of your personal guards. He's been here for 8 years, completely trusted, absolutely loyal, or so we thought. Gale spread photographs across the desk, images captured by her surveillance network. He's been meeting with Wanda's contact in the Eastern Territories, passing information about Isla's movements, her medical condition, everything. Where is he now? Secured in the lower cells. He doesn't know we've identified him yet. I thought you'd want to question him personally. Luther looked at Isla. This is your chance. Your chance to ask questions, to understand who's behind this. Isla stood, feeling the triplets flutter inside her, a sensation that was becoming familiar now, comforting despite its strangeness. Then let's ask him, she said, before we run out of time. They descended into the Citadel's depths, where ancient stone gave way to older stone, and the air tasted of secrets and suffering. Jonathan Blake sat chained to a chair in a cell lit by a single torch. When he saw Luther and Isla, his expression shifted from defiance to something like fear. Your Majesty, There's been a mistake. No mistake. Luther's voice was ice. We have evidence of your meetings with court operatives. We have records of information you've passed. The only question now is whether you cooperate or whether I let Isla practice her newly manifested curse-breaker abilities on whatever bindings the court has placed on you. Jonathan's eyes widened. She can't. The suppression is broken. Completely. She's not just a curse-breaker anymore, Jonathan. She's the curse-breaker, the one your masters have been trying to prevent from existing for a century. Luther leaned closer. So I'll ask once, who leads the Twilight Court? Give me names. Jonathan was sweating now. I don't know names. No one does. The council members are protected by blood oaths. If I try to reveal them, the oaths will kill me. Then you're useless to us. Luther turned to leave. Wait! Jonathan's composure cracked. I can't give you names, but I can tell you when they're planning to strike. I can tell you their strategy. Isla stepped forward. Talk. They know about the accelerated pregnancy. Wanda reported it before she fled. They're not waiting for the blood moon. They're moving in 3 weeks. During the new moon, when your defenses are focused on the ritual preparation. How do they know about the ritual? Luther demanded. Jonathan's laugh was bitter. Because I told them. When Emily Cook arrived, when you started gathering bonded pairs, when you began fortifying the Northern Temple site, I reported everything. Isla felt cold rage settle over her. You've been helping them kill children, unborn children. I've been helping them maintain the natural order. Jonathan's voice rose. Curse breakers shouldn't exist, yet they shouldn't mix with old bloodlines. The chaos it could cause? The chaos of what? People being free? Curses being broken? Power structures that depend on suffering being dismantled? Isla's hands glowed faintly, her curse-breaker ability responding to her emotion. You're not protecting order. You're protecting tyranny. She placed her glowing hand against Jonathan's chest, and he screamed. Not because she was hurting him, she wasn't, not yet, but because he could feel what she was doing. Feel her curse-breaker ability searching through the magical bindings on him, identifying the blood oaths that kept him silent. 3 oaths, Isla said, her voice distant, analytical. 1 preventing you from speaking names, 1 preventing you from betraying the court's location, and 1... She pressed harder, and Jonathan convulsed. Hey, 1 that will kill you if you're captured and interrogated for more than 24 hours. Isla, don't... Luther started. I'm not going to kill him. I'm going to break the oaths. Her eyes met Luther's. I can do it. I can feel how they're structured. They're old magic, but they're still magic. Still curses. Still breakable. If you break them wrong, he dies. Then I'd better not break them wrong. Isla closed her eyes and let her ability flow. She felt the oaths like knots in Jonathan's life force, pulled tight, ready to strangle if yanked the wrong way. Carefully, gently. She began to unravel them. The first oath resisted, then yielded. The second fought harder, and she felt Jonathan scream again as the magical backlash tore through him, but she held steady, pulling the curse apart thread by thread. The third oath was the deadliest. It was anchored to his heart, designed to stop it the moment it sensed betrayal. Isla paused, breathed, felt the triplets inside her, 3 lives depending on her success. Then she struck, not at the oath itself, but at its anchor point. She severed the connection between the curse and Jonathan's heart in 1 clean cut. The oath shattered. Jonathan collapsed, gasping, alive but barely. Now, Isla said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. Tell us everything. And Jonathan Blake, freed from the oaths that had bound him, began to talk. Chapter 9. The Blood Moon Birth. Jonathan's confession changed everything. The Twilight Court's attack would come in 3 weeks during the new moon, targeting the Northern Temple where Luther and Isla planned to perform the celestial ritual. But more than that, Jonathan revealed the court's structure. Not names, which the oaths had successfully hidden even from Isla's ability, but methods, safe houses, communication channels, and most critically, the identity of the other two agents in the Citadel. One was a kitchen servant who'd been poisoning Isla's food with trace amounts of a compound designed to weaken the triplets. The dosage was too small to trigger alarm, but over weeks it would have caused developmental problems. The other was Raymond Bryant, Luther's most trusted beta, the man who'd served the Blackthorn Crown for 30 years. When the guards dragged Raymond into the cell, his expression showed no surprise, only resignation. "How long?" Luther asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Since your father died." Raymond met his king's eyes without flinching. "The court approached me after the funeral, told me the truth about your mother's death, about how your father's obsession with breaking her curse had cost 3 lives. They convinced me that preventing another Blackthorn from attempting the same thing was mercy. You've been sabotaging me for 10 years. I've been trying to save you from repeating your father's mistakes." Raymond's voice held genuine pain. "But you wouldn't listen. You kept researching, kept collecting specimens, kept obsessing over curse breaking. And then she arrived." He looked at Isla. "And I knew you'd try. I knew you'd risk everything for the possibility of success. So you helped them plan to kill her. I helped them plan to prevent you from destroying yourself." Raymond's composure cracked. "Your father died of grief 3 months after your mother and sisters. Did you know that? The official report said heart failure, but it was grief. He couldn't live with what his arrogance had cost. I watched him waste away, and I swore I wouldn't let his son follow the same path." Luther was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was granite. "You swore loyalty to the Blackthorn Crown. You swore to protect this bloodline. Hey, and you betrayed that oath because you thought you knew better than your king." "I betrayed that oath because I love you like a son." Raymond's eyes glistened. "And I can't watch you die the way your father did." "Then you should have trusted me to make my own choices." Luther turned to Gale. "Lock him in the maximum security cell, strip him of rank and title, and make sure the court doesn't know we've discovered him. Luther, I'm done listening to people who claim to protect me by controlling my life." Luther's voice was final. "Remove him." As the guards dragged Raymond away, Isla felt the triplets flutter inside her, agitated, responding to the emotional turmoil in the room. She pressed her hand to her abdomen, willing them to calm. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks to prepare for an attack that would come from multiple directions, orchestrated by enemies who'd spent a century perfecting the art of assassination. 3 weeks before they attempted to rip a blood moon out of the sky ahead of schedule. 3 weeks before everything either succeeded spectacularly or failed catastrophically. "We need to accelerate our own timeline," Gale said quietly. "If the court learns we've captured their agents—" "They already know," Luther interrupted, "or they will soon. Jonathan's death timer oath was set for 24 hours. We broke it, but the court will notice when he doesn't die on schedule. They'll assume we've extracted information and move up their attack. How much time do we have?" "Days. Maybe less." Luther looked at Isla. "Can you perform the ritual early, before the next full moon?" "Emily said we need a full moon to anchor to. And the next one is in 6 weeks. Emily also said accelerating celestial events requires massive power and precise timing. What if we don't try to pull the blood moon forward? What if we create a localized blood moon effect?" Isla stared at him. "Is that even possible?" "I don't know, but Emily might." Luther was already moving toward the door. "If we can create the right magical conditions in a controlled space, simulate the blood moon's energy signature, we might be able to break the curse's final binding without actually affecting the real moon." "That's insane. So is everything else we've done?" They found Emily in the archive, surrounded by texts so old the pages threatened to crumble at a touch. When Luther explained his theory, she was quiet for so long that Isla thought she'd reject it outright. Then Emily laughed, that wind through dead trees sound that raised the hair on Isla's neck. "You beautiful, reckless fool," she said. "You want to create an artificial blood moon, a pocket celestial event contained within a ritual space. Can it be done? It's never been done. The power requirements alone would be astronomical. You'd need—" Emily's eyes widened as calculation took over. "You'd need a curse breaker at the center, absorbing and redirecting enough magical energy to convince the curse structure that the real blood moon had arrived. You'd need that energy to come from a source tied to both life and death, creation and destruction. You'd need—" She looked at Isla's abdomen. "You'd need the triplets themselves to power it." Isla felt ice flood her veins. "No, absolutely not. I'm not using my unborn children as magical batteries. Not batteries. Anchors." Emily moved closer, her ancient eyes bright with terrible possibility. "Think about it. 3 lives created through curse breaking. 3 lives that shouldn't exist according to the laws the court has enforced for centuries. 3 lives that represent everything the court fears. Their very existence is a disruption of the old order. That doesn't mean their life force is already generating massive amounts of magical energy. That's why they're growing so fast. That's why Isla's curse-breaker ability has amplified." Emily's voice gained intensity. "If we can channel that energy, not drain it, just redirect it, we can create a localized blood moon effect strong enough to complete the curse-breaking. The triplets would be powering their own liberation." Luther's expression was agonized. "The risk? The risk is they're born with the curse still partially active, and the court spends the next 13 years trying to rebind them." Emily's bluntness cut through sentiment. "This way, they're born completely free. No residual curse, no vulnerability, nothing the court can exploit." "And if it fails?" Isla asked quietly. "Then we all die. You, me, Luther, the triplets, and probably everyone in a half-mile radius when the magical backlash hits." Emily shrugged. "But you were going to die anyway if you did nothing. At least this way you're choosing how you fight." Isla looked at Luther. In his gray eyes she saw the same calculation she was making, the same terrible arithmetic of impossible choices. "We do it," she said, "but on our terms." "Well, we don't wait for the court to attack. We force them to come to us on ground we've prepared." "How?" Luther asked. "We leak information through Raymond. Let him think we haven't discovered his betrayal. Feed him false intelligence about when and where we're performing the ritual." Isla's mind was racing now, strategy crystallizing. "We make the court think we're vulnerable, that we're attempting the full celestial acceleration at the Northern Temple in 2 weeks. While actually performing the localized ritual, here, in the Citadel, in the most defensible location we have." Isla looked at Emily. "Can the ritual be performed underground, somewhere we can control access?" "If we modify the containment structure, yes. The blood moon effect doesn't need actual moonlight. It needs the right magical resonance." Emily was already pulling out parchment, sketching diagrams. "We'd need to carve the ritual circle directly into bedrock, create a chamber that can withstand massive energy fluctuations, and we'd need the 50 bonded pairs providing power, but they could be positioned in a defensive formation around the ritual site." "We have the lower archive chamber," Luther said. "It's carved from a single piece of ancient stone. It's been used for high-energy rituals before." "How deep?" 3 levels below the main citadel, accessible only through a single heavily guarded passage. Emily nodded. "That could work. We'd have 1 week to prepare the chamber, gather the bonded pairs, and fortify the approach. Meanwhile, Raymond feeds the court false information about the Northern Temple, and when they attack there, they find nothing but a heavily armed welcome party." Isla finished. "We capture more agents, extract more information, and use what we learn to finally identify the court's leadership. While you're giving birth in a magically charged ritual chamber, attempting to create an artificial blood moon," Luther added dryly. "Just want to make sure we're all clear on the plan." Despite everything, Isla laughed. "When you say it like that, it sounds insane." It is insane. Luther took her hand. But it's also the only option we have that doesn't involve surrendering to people who cursed you before you were born. So if we're doing insane, we might as well do it thoroughly. The next 7 days were controlled chaos. Emily and Luther worked around the clock to prepare the ritual chamber, carving symbols into bedrock with tools infused with enough magic to make Isla's teeth ache from 3 floors away. Gale recruited the bonded pairs, 50 couples who volunteered to risk their lives for a chance to strike back at the court that had cursed, controlled, or killed their own family members. Gregory arrived with 30 of his best warriors, all of whom had personal grudges against the Twilight Court. They fortified the Northern Temple as a decoy, making it look like the real ritual site while actually preparing it as a trap. And Isla grew. In 7 days, her pregnancy advanced what should have been another month. Her abdomen swelled dramatically, the triplets pressing against her skin hard enough that she could see the outline of tiny hands and feet. They moved constantly now, a writhing mass of life that felt both alien and utterly precious. Luther examined her daily, his expression growing more concerned each time. "They're running out of space," he said on the 6th day. "At this rate, they'll be ready to be born in 72 hours, maybe less." "Perfect timing, then," Isla said, trying for levity despite the fear coiling in her gut. "We perform the ritual in 72 hours, the court attacks the decoy site, and the triplets are born free. Or we all die trying. Always the optimist." He kissed her forehead. "I'm a realist who happens to love a woman too stubborn to accept impossible." The words hung between them, the first time either had said love explicitly. "I love you too," Isla said quietly. "In case we don't survive this, I wanted you to know." "We're surviving this." Luther's voice was absolute, all 5 of us, because I refused to lose you after finally finding you. On the 7th day, Raymond, still pretending ignorance of his exposure, reported to his court contacts that the ritual would occur at dawn in 3 days at the Northern Temple. The trap was set. The court took the bait, and in the ritual chamber 3 levels below the citadel, 50 bonded pairs took their positions around a circle carved with symbols that predated written language, while Emily made final adjustments to the containment structure that would either save 5 lives or end them spectacularly. Isla stood at the center of the circle, her hands pressed against her swollen abdomen, feeling 3 heartbeats synchronize with her own. "We're ready," she told Luther. He positioned himself at the circle's northern point, the anchor position that would ground the massive energies about to be unleashed. "Then let's pull down the moon," he said. Emily began to chant. The 50 bonded pairs joined their voices to hers, and deep beneath the Blackthorn Citadel, as the Twilight Court's assassins descended on an empty northern temple, a new kind of magic began to wake. The triplets stirred, and the artificial blood moon began to rise. Chapter 10. The New World. The ritual chamber burned with light that had no source. Isla felt the energy rising through her like a tide, power from 50 bonded pairs flowing into her, through her, redirecting itself into the ritual circle carved beneath her feet. The symbols blazed crimson, the exact color of a blood moon hanging low on the horizon. But this moon wasn't in the sky. It was here, now, manifesting in the space between heartbeats. The triplets responded immediately. Isla gasped as she felt them pull at the energy, not draining it from her but cycling it through themselves, amplifying it, transforming it into something that resonated with the ancient curse structure still clinging to their developing forms. "It's working!" Emily's voice was awed. "The curse is recognizing the blood moon signature! It's beginning final dissolution!" But the process was agony. Isla felt the curse fighting, felt it trying to complete its work before the artificial moon could break it. The calcification that had nearly disappeared surged back, spreading through her abdomen like wildfire, trying to turn her womb to stone before the triplets could be born. "Luther!" she screamed. He was there instantly, his hands glowing with healing energy, but Emily grabbed his arm. "Don't! If you interrupt the energy flow now, the backlash will kill everyone in the chamber." Her ancient eyes were fierce. "She has to break it herself. That's the only way." Isla fell to her knees, the pain overwhelming every sense. The curse was millennia old, crafted by blood mages who'd perfected the art of suffering. It knew how to hurt, knew how to break. But Isla knew something it didn't. She knew how to choose. "No," she gasped, her hands pressed against her stone-hard abdomen. "You don't get to win. Not today, not ever." She reached for her Cursebreaker ability, not the gentle unraveling she'd used on Jonathan, but something fiercer. She grabbed the curse structure and ripped. The curse screamed. If magic could scream, this did. A sound that shattered 3 of the glass observation windows and sent several bonded pairs to their knees. Isla didn't stop. She tore at the curse with everything she had, fueled by rage and love and the desperate need to protect the 3 lives inside her. The artificial blood moon flared brilliant crimson. The curse shattered, and Isla's water broke. "She's in labor!" Luther was beside her, supporting her weight as her legs gave out. "Emily, we need to... The ritual isn't complete." Emily's hands moved in complex patterns, trying to stabilize the energy flow, even as Isla's body began the violent work of birth. "If we stop now, the curse will reassert. We need 10 more minutes." "She doesn't have 10 minutes." Luther looked at Isla, saw the agony in her eyes, the blood beginning to stain her dress. "The triplets are coming now!" A contraction hit. Massive, overwhelming, her body trying to expel 3 lives simultaneously. Isla screamed, and the sound echoed off the bedrock walls. Through the pain, she felt it, the curse making one final desperate attempt, not at her, at the triplets. It was trying to bind them as they were born, trying to complete what had been started before Isla's own birth. "No," Isla snarled. She poured every ounce of her Cursebreaker ability into her womb, but creating a shield between the curse and her children. "You can't have them. They're mine. They're ours. They're free." The curse struck at her shield. Once. Twice. On the 3rd strike, Isla's shield held, and on the 4th, it struck back. The Cursebreaker ability that had been dormant for 23 years, that had been awakened through love and choice and desperate need, finally manifested at full power. Isla didn't just break the curse, she obliterated it. The explosion of magical energy sent shockwaves through the ritual chamber. Half the bonded pairs were thrown backward. Emily was knocked flat. Even Luther staggered. But Isla remained standing, glowing with power that made her look like she was carved from light itself. And in that moment of absolute power, the first child was born. A daughter. Yet she emerged into Luther's waiting hands, tiny, perfect, and screaming with a voice that shook the foundations of the citadel. Her skin had a faint silver shimmer, legacy of the curse that had tried and failed to claim her. "1," Luther breathed, his voice breaking. The second child followed moments later, sliding into the world with the inevitability of dawn. A son. He was quieter than his sister, but his eyes, gray like his father's, opened immediately, focusing on Isla with an intensity that was almost frightening in a newborn. 2, Isla gasped. The third child took longer. Isla felt her body struggling, felt the exhaustion threatening to drag her under. She'd poured so much energy into breaking the curse that she had almost nothing left for the final birth. "Come on," Luther urged, his free hand pressed against her abdomen. "One more. Oh, you can do this. One more." Isla bore down with the last of her strength, and the third child, another daughter, was born into a world that the Twilight Court had tried for a century to prevent from existing. She didn't cry. Instead, she looked around the ritual chamber with dark, knowing eyes that seemed far too old for a newborn. And then she smiled. 3, Isla whispered, and then collapsed. She woke in her recovery chamber, sunlight streaming through the windows, and for a moment couldn't remember where she was or what had happened. Then she heard it. 3 distinct cries coming from 3 separate bassinets positioned around the room. Isla tried to sit up and found Luther beside her immediately, supporting her weight. "Easy," he said. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Yeah, your body needs time to recover." "The babies?" "Are perfect, healthy, completely free of the curse." His smile was radiant. "You did it, Isla. You broke something that was supposed to be unbreakable." Isla looked at the bassinets, at 3 tiny faces, 3 pairs of lungs demanding attention with admirable vigor. "I want to hold them," she said. Luther helped her sit up fully, then brought the first bassinet closer. The silver-skinned daughter who'd been born, screaming. "This is Elena," he said quietly. "I thought, if you approve, we could name her after your mother." Isla's throat tightened. She took the baby carefully, feeling the warm, solid weight of her. Elena's cries quieted immediately, and she stared up at Isla with eyes that were neither gray nor brown, but something in between. "Hello, Elena," Isla whispered. Your grandmother would be so proud." Luther brought the second bassinet, the gray-eyed son who'd been born quiet and watching. "And this is Raymond." Isla's head snapped up. After the man who spent 30 years trying to protect me, even when his protection was misguided and wrong. Luther's expression was complex. He was executed yesterday. The court's binding oaths killed him the moment he realized we'd won. But before he died, he asked to see the triplets, asked if they were safe. Luther touched the baby's soft head gently. When I told him yes, he smiled. Said maybe I'd inherited my father's obsession but not his fate. Then he died. Luther's voice was rough. I can't forgive what he did, but I can acknowledge that he loved me, that he tried, in his broken way, to save me. This feels like appropriate complexity. Isla nodded, understanding. She took Raymond into her arms, and he immediately grabbed her finger with surprising strength. The third bassinet held the dark-eyed daughter who'd been born smiling. "And this one?" Isla asked. "I was hoping you'd name her." Luther sat beside Isla on the bed, careful not to jostle the 2 babies she already held. "She's the one who came last, the one you fought hardest to bring into the world." Isla looked at the baby girl with the knowing eyes and ancient smile. "Hope," she said. "Her name is Hope, because that's what she represents, what all 3 of them represent. Hope for a future the court tried to prevent." The victory celebration lasted 3 days. Gregory arrived with his entire pack, and bringing gifts and warriors to help fortify the citadel against any remaining court agents. Gale's network had captured 12 assassins at the Northern Temple, and under interrogation, with Isla's cursebreaker ability ensuring no binding oaths could prevent confession, they'd revealed critical information. The Twilight Court's leadership had been 3 ancient blood mages, all over 300 years old, who'd built their power on maintaining curse structures across dozens of bloodlines. But when Isla had obliterated the curse on the triplets, she'd inadvertently destroyed the template that all court curses were built on. Every curse the court had ever created was unraveling. Across the territories, wolves who'd been cursed for generations were waking up free. Cursebreakers who'd been suppressed were manifesting their abilities, and the court's power structure, built on a foundation of enforced suffering, was collapsing. The 3 leaders had died within hours of Isla's curse-breaking, their own binding oaths turning against them when the magic they'd anchored to ceased to exist. The Twilight Court was over. On the 4th day after the birth, Isla stood on the eastern battlement, watching the sunset. The triplets were with Luther in the nursery, probably being fussed over by 6 healers and guards who'd all fallen completely in love with them. Gale joined her at the wall. "You've created a problem, you know," the spy master said conversationally. "Only one?" "Well, several, but the main one is that 47 territories have sent formal requests for your help. Bloodlines with curses that are unraveling but need guidance. Pacts with curse breakers who are manifesting abilities for the first time and don't know how to control them. You've become the most important person in the shifter world without even trying. Isla laughed. A month ago I was dying. 2 months ago I was being traded away like unwanted cargo. Now I'm important? Now you're legendary. Gale's expression was serious. What you did, breaking a century-old curse, creating an artificial blood moon, giving birth to 3 children who shouldn't exist, people are calling it the New Awakening, the beginning of a new era. That's a lot of pressure. You've handled worse. Gale paused. The question is, what do you want to do with it? Isla was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars begin to appear. I want to help them, she said finally. And all the people still suffering under curses they didn't choose. All the curse breakers who've been told they're broken. I want to make sure no one else has to go through what my mother went through, what I went through. That's going to take years, maybe decades. Then I'd better get started. She turned to head back inside where 3 impossible children were waiting, and where a king who'd chosen to risk everything for love was probably trying to figure out how to change 3 diapers simultaneously. But Gale's voice stopped her. Isla, your mother would be proud, not just of what you accomplished, of who you've become. Isla felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you for everything you did to help make this possible. I didn't do much. You and Luther did the impossible part. You gave us the information we needed to survive. That's not nothing. As Isla walked back through the citadel, she passed dozens of people who stopped to bow, to smile, to congratulate. She acknowledged them all, but her mind was already moving forward. 47 territories needed help. 3 children needed to grow up in a world that was better than the one she'd been born into. And somewhere out there, more curse breakers were waking up, discovering abilities they'd been told they'd never have, needing guidance and training and hope. It was overwhelming. It was impossible. It was exactly what Isla Thorne had spent her entire life preparing for without knowing it. She found Luther in the nursery, exactly as she'd predicted, looking adorably overwhelmed with 3 babies who'd all decided to need attention simultaneously. Help, he said when he saw her. Isla laughed and picked up Hope, who immediately stopped fussing and grabbed Isla's hair with tiny, determined fists. You're the king of the Lycan territories, Isla teased. You command armies, you perform impossible magic, and you're defeated by 3 6-pound humans? These 3 6-pound humans are more terrifying than any army I've ever faced. But Luther was smiling, his gray eyes soft with love as he looked at their children. How was your conversation with Gale? Overwhelming. 47 territories want our help. We've apparently started a revolution without meaning to. So what do we do? Isla looked at him. At this man who'd given her truth and choice and love when everyone else had given her shame and abandonment. At the children they'd created against impossible odds. At the future spreading out before them like an unwritten book. We help them, she said. All of them. We make sure no one else has to suffer under curses designed to control them. We train curse breakers. We hunt down any remaining court sympathizers. We build a world where our children can grow up free. That's a big job. Good thing there are 5 of us to do it. Luther kissed her, gentle and sweet, while 3 babies, 3 impossible, perfect free children, watched with curious eyes. Outside, the blood moon finally rose. The real one this time, right on schedule, 6 months after Isla had arrived at the citadel expecting to die. It painted the sky crimson, and across the territories, curse breakers woke to their power, felt their abilities manifest for the first time, and looked at the blood moon with wonder instead of fear. At the new awakening had begun, and at its heart were 3 children who'd been born free, 2 people who'd chosen love over fear, and a future that no ancient conspiracy could ever take away. Isla stood at the window with Hope in her arms, watching the blood moon rise, and thought of her mother. I kept my promise, she thought. I fought. I survived. And I'm making sure our story has a better ending. The moon hung brilliant and red against the night sky, and in the nursery of the Blackthorn Citadel, 3 children who shouldn't exist slept peacefully, dreaming of a world they would grow up to change. Epilogue. 5 years later. The training grounds of the Blackthorn Citadel echoed with laughter. Elena, 5 years old, and already showing signs of her mother's cursebreaker ability, was teaching a group of newly manifested cursebreakers how to sense magical bindings. Her silver-shimmered skin caught the sunlight as she moved, patient and serious beyond her years. Raymond practiced combat forms with Gregory's son, his gray eyes focused and intense, already displaying the tactical mind he'd inherited from his father. And Hope sat in the garden with Isla, helping her mother catalog the herbs they were growing to counteract the few remaining court curses still causing problems in distant territories. "Mama," Hope said, her dark eyes wise, "when can I start helping with the big curses?" "When you're older, sweetheart. But I'm ready now." Isla smiled. Hope had been ready since birth. All 3 of them had. Luther emerged from the Citadel, carrying correspondents from 17 different territories, all requesting assistance with curse-breaking or cursebreaker training. "We're going to need to expand the training program," he said, sitting beside Isla on the garden bench. "Again. How many new students this month?" 43. And that's just the confirmed cursebreakers. There are probably twice that many who've manifested but don't know what they're experiencing yet. Isla looked at the 3 children playing in the afternoon sun, at the Citadel that had become not just a home, but a sanctuary for people reclaiming stolen power, at the man beside her who'd chosen to risk everything for an impossible chance. "We'll manage," she said. "We always do." And they would, because that's what it meant to be a cursebreaker. Not that you couldn't be harmed, but that you refused to let harm be the end of your story.